So, it's around that time of the year where we go over NHL media people, insiders, trade speculators, and talk about all the things that did not happen at the trade deadline. Things that were on the table, things that were sort of up in the air, but that ultimately did not get accomplished and therefore might be worth revisiting sometime later in the season. And by season, I mean the off-season, because you can't make any more trades in the regular season. That's kind of how the trade deadline works, unless you are okay with these players not being able to play. So, we're going over onto the 32 Thoughts article from Elliotte Friedman published immediately after the deadline. This is Evgeny Dadonov and the trade deadline fallout. The link will be in the description if you want to go ahead and read this piece. Now, spoiler alert, we're going to go out there and pull up several topics from this individual article over the next few days. I'm going on another trip on the weekend, so I do have to pre-record some material over here, so if anything gets out of date quickly, then I apologize for that. But today's video is going to focus on the Montreal Canadiens, and it's going to focus on the Ottawa Senators as well. How Pierre Dorion falls into this, we'll get to that. How Kent Hughes falls into this, we'll get into that in more ways than one. Let's talk about Colin White, who is an Ottawa Senators player that might be on the block. Before we go over to what Friedman writes about White and how his trade situation is going on, let's go over the profile right here. Colin White is 25 years old, 6 feet 183, a right-handed center making $4.75 million a year till the end of 2025. White was a former top-round pick by the Ottawa Senators, taken 21st overall in the 2015 draft, and immediately after that season, he was seen as one of the more productive and underrated Senators forward prospects. He was over a point per game for BC in 2 years. Actually, the second year he was just under a point per game, and a few years after that, he posted up a 41-point season in 71 games for the Senators. However, injuries have started to catch up with Colin White, and as a result, he's only got 13 games played right now, and he has a total of 6 points. He's projected for 14 points over 32 games, which means that he would have missed exactly 50 games on the season, which really isn't great for a guy making $4.75 million a year, and who is kind of supposed to be in his prime, quote-unquote. Now, there have been some other issues regarding Colin White and his deployment, the way that he's played out there, how much the Senators choose to use him, and because there's a little bit of uncertainty as to what exactly the direction is the Sens want to go with this player, there have been rumors sparking up as to whether or not the Sens would want to trade this guy. Furthermore, we have ourselves another part of the contract that I think you should also pay attention to, just because, you know, Pierre Dorion, Eugene Melnyk, these guys are the same guys that they've always been. Colin White, as we said, making $4.75 million a year as the cap hit. This season, 21-22, was the first year on his, 6-year contract, where he's actually making the amount of money he's making on his AAV. The previous 2 seasons on the contract, which he was awarded after that pretty good 41-point campaign, both saw him get less money than the amount of money he's being paid on the AAV. His actual salary was $4 million compared to the 4.75. So if you want to go out there and talk about how the Ottawa Senators are run by guys that don't want to go out there and spend, there is a conversation you can be having. It's kind of why I decided to bring it up. Let's go over onto 32 Thoughts and look at what Friedman has to say about White. Something to keep an eye on. White and the Habs. Canadiens GM Kent Hughes represented White, negotiating his current contract with the Senators. There were conversations and, for a time, a few sources expected a trade to happen. We'll see if it gets revisited. And, yeah, Kent Hughes was the former player agent of Mr. Colin White himself. In fact, Colin White is, the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth most expensive AAV contract that Kent Hughes had signed. He had signed Letang, Bergeron, Nurse, Batherson, Matheson, and then there was Colin White too. So there you go, that $4.75 million AAV cap hit smack dab in the middle of that 6-year deal was given to the guy by, firstly, Pierre Dorion, but it was negotiated by Kent Hughes himself. If there is a world where the Ottawa Senators feel like their center core could be okay without a Colin White, that the overall development path that they set out for this guy just hasn't been there, and at this point he might not be worth the money, because we know how much the Ottawa Senators and their ownership don't like spending extra dollars. Who knows if there's a possibility that we can see a trade? The fact that Friedman is writing that some NHL people also expected a trade to go down is something that intrigues me as well. And so, with the Ottawa Senators being the team they are, and you see Pierre Dorion going into the media saying, okay, next year we don't want to be a seller anymore. We actually want to go out there and start competing. We want to be contenders in the short term. Yeah, I know, it kind of sounds like some hocus-pocus clown stuff, right? But either way, that's the sentiment we're getting from the Ottawa Senators and their management. If you were, let's say, Kent Hughes, and you were to call up the Ottawa Senators and say, hey, remember me? I'm the guy that negotiated that contract that you're trying to get rid of right now. How about my team, which is in a rebuilding state? Montreal's not really supposed to be good in the short-term future. They've got some good players, they got a good coach, they've got all this stuff, but they're not really supposed to be great yet. It's why they were sellers at the deadline. What if we take on that contract? You don't want it, right? So how about you give it to us, but you also give us something else of value as well? Whether that's an Ottawa first-round pick or a second-round pick, whatever you feel the rights to a contract like that would be worth, if you're thinking that the Ottawa Senators would benefit if they traded Colin White away. If it's a first-round pick, then honestly I'm starting to get a little bit more intrigued, because the Ottawa Senators have had some pretty high-end first-round picks over the past few years. Obviously, Tim Stützle, 3rd overall. You have Tyler Boucher, who went 10th overall. My goodness, we're going to have to make a video about him. He's been such an interesting prospect to follow from the 2021 draft. But if the Sens are in a position to really say to themselves, all right, we need to make the playoffs. We're not going to be sellers anymore. We're going to be the ones buying. Okay, maybe they won't be that extreme, but you get what I mean, right? If the Senators had themselves that perspective, okay, all of a sudden first-round picks are available as long as we can get rid of Colin White and maybe get somebody of very small value of return from the Montreal Canadiens. That's a net positive for us because our goal is to make the playoffs. The thing is, even though that sounds so irrational, like that is not something that most people would think is a proper way to run a hockey team, because it's Ottawa, I could sort of engage in that kind of discussion. And I feel for the Ottawa Senators fan base, because you guys have to go out there and live through this. You saw the Hamonic deal and the response to the Hamonic trade, and how you saw the Senators pretty much trying to justify it through the media with all of the conversations they had with the press. And all of a sudden now, you're thinking about it from Kent Hughes' perspective. Okay, what is there to gain when acquiring a 25-year-old center on a $4.75 million deal till 2025? And I get it, you hear till 2025 and you're like, wow, that's such a long time away. That's like Black Ops 2 times right there. But then you realize, oh, it's 2022 right now. The guy's got 2022, 2023, 324, 24, 25 after this year, so that's only 3 more years of this dude. And, I mean, half a point a game so far is not bad, but, like, he only did that in 13 games, so the sample size isn't really reliable. The season before that, he was on pace for 30-something points over 82 games. That's not a $4.75 million player right there. Unfortunately, it feels like Kent Hughes just got the better of Pierre Dorion and the rest of the Senators management over here. And so just hearing about the possibility that he might be the guy to rid them of that contract as well, with the expense of maybe a draft pick that is somewhat valuable or another prospect or whatever, it is kind of poetic, is it not? It's full circle over here. And so wrapping up my thoughts of this conversation of Colin White and the Montreal Canadiens, is this a player that I think the Habs should get because he will improve their team? No, probably not. You want to talk about all the rumors about trading Dvorak and all this stuff? I don't think that Colin White would be an ad that makes the team better on a net positive kind of way on the ice. I wouldn't really think that's the case. I feel like Kent Hughes would be trying to get Colin White because he knows how much of a burden that contract is to the Senators. He would know, based off of conversations with other NHL GMs and maybe even the Sens themselves, what the gauge is as to whether or not they would be willing to trade this guy. And as a result, because the Canadiens are rebuilding right now, because they have themselves a chance to maybe use their cap space in a weaponizing way, maybe he could go out there and say, hey, give us Colin White, but also give us a pick. A significant pick, something like that. And they say yes because it's Pierre Dorion and don't want to be paying a guy over or at the AAV that he has been given. So it's just a thought out there. Wanted to make a video about this because it's an interesting conversation. Colin White was really good, but he got slowed down a ton over the past few years. It's really unfortunate to see, especially as a 2015 first-round pick. That 2015 draft was so stacked, and Colin White, to me, was always in that tier of mid-20s guys alongside of Besser and Connor and Shabbat and all that really defined the draft as being as deep as it was. But it's just unfortunate that his career has not gone the same way as some of these other guys have. But either way, you can let me know in the comments below what do you think about Colin White and the idea of him getting traded to Montreal. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.